Good morning, Scotland. Good morning, social media land. I hope you're well. It is Thursday, the 21st of November, 2024. How much longer must we endure the perpetual lies of the Union that not only exploits us, but dares to brand us too weak, too small, and too poor to stand on our own 2 feet? If Scotland is such an unworthy partner in this so-called union, why does Westminster cling to us so desperately? Why do they suppress the truth of our wealth while draining our resources to prop up a system that serves their interests and not ours? These are not just questions of politics. They are questions of justice, dignity. They are questions of survival. In 1968, a civil servant in London stumbled across a shocking truth buried deep within the Treasury's books. Scotland was not the burden it has always been made out to be. It was, in fact, quite the opposite. Scotland had been contributing significantly more to the UK economy, more than it's received in return, even before the oil boom transformed the North Sea into a financial powerhouse. This revelation struck like a thunderbolt, shattering the carefully crafted narrative of Scotland, a dependent nation on the benevolence of London. But instead of letting this truth shine, the Treasury and its allies in the media chose to suppress it, afraid it might ignite the spark of Scottish nationalism. For decades, this lie festered. It wasn't until 1997, nearly 30 years later, that the first crack in Westminster's armour appeared. Treasury Minister William Waldegrave was under pressure from SNP leader Alex Salmond. He was forced to admit in the House of Commons that Scotland had contributed 27 billion more to the UK Exchequer than it had received since 1979. That's £5,400 from every single Scot, money siphoned off to fund projects and policies that often did little to no benefit at all for Scotland. This admission should have been a national scandal, yet the unionist-controlled media quickly buried the story, ensuring the myth of a dependent Scotland endured. The following year brought yet another revelation. A report from the House of Commons Library ranked Scotland seventh in the world in terms of GDP per capita, while the UK languished in 17th place. Once again, the truth was undeniable. Scotland was a wealthy nation, burdened not by its own limitations, but by a union that used its resources to mask the economic failures of others. Westminster's failure to capitalise on Scotland's oil wealth as Norway did is perhaps the most glaring example of this exploitation. While Norway established a tremendous sovereign wealth fund that now secures its prosperity, Westminster squandered Scotland's oil revenues to the tune of 300 billion on propping up the wider UK economy. This pattern of deceit and mismanagement is not confined to history. It's a recurring theme, as predictable as it is infuriating. In 1999, during a televised debate, Donald Dewar defended a Labour Party claim that families in Scotland would be £250 worse off if the SNP reversed Gordon Brown's tax cut. Salmond, armed with the facts, exposed this as a blatant lie. Yet Dewar ploughed on, confident in the knowledge that Labour's mistakes would later be dismissed as printing errors. This was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader strategy to distort Scotland's economic reality, feeding voters in Middle England a narrative that reinforced their sense of superiority while keeping Scotland in its place. The numbers don't lie, even if unionist politicians do. By 2006, Scotland was running an annual surplus of £2.8 billion, equating to £560 for every man, woman and child. Meanwhile, the UK as a whole faced a staggering deficit of £34.8 billion. And yet the myth of Scotland as a subsidy junkie still persisted. A 2007 report analysed even by the anti-independence Daily Mail revealed that Scotland's per capita deficit was a mere £38 compared to Northern Ireland's of 4,212 and the northeast of England's at £3,133. The only region of the UK at that time producing a surplus was the southeast, buoyed by the high wages of London's financial sector, a sector disproportionately supported by the revenues generated in Scotland. Despite these facts, Westminster continues to act as though Scotland is incapable of managing its own affairs. They ignore our burgeoning renewable energy sector, which already exports more than 24% of its surplus electricity to England. They downplay the value of our whisky industry, which has seen exports to markets like China grow from 1 million in 2000 to over 71.5 million in 2012. They dismiss the untapped potential of the oil fields west of Shetland and the 30 years of production still remaining in the North Sea, worth an estimated $1 trillion at 2008 prices. Instead, they peddle fear and uncertainty, hoping to keep us tethered to a union that siphons off our wealth while offering little in return. Westminster's exploitation of Scotland is not confined to economics. It extends to the very narrative of our nationhood. Politicians like Danny Alexander parrot scripted warnings of financial ruin, ignoring the overwhelming evidence of Scotland's economic viability. Meanwhile, unionist-controlled media amplify these messages, drowning out the voices that speak to Scotland's potential. This is not governance. It's manipulation, a deliberate attempt to keep Scotland subservient. The comparison with Norway is stark and damning. Like Scotland, Norway discovered oil in the North Sea. Unlike Westminster, however, the Norwegian government acted with foresight, creating an oil fund that has become the cornerstone of its economic success. By 2008, that fund had reached £250 billion, allowing Norway to weather the global financial crisis with relative ease. Scotland, denied control of its resources, was left to watch as its wealth underwrote the economic failures of others. What might have Scotland achieved if it had been allowed to chart its own course, to invest its resources in its people rather than subsidising a union that treats it as an afterthought? Since the referendum on Scottish independence, the unionist playbook remains pretty much unchanged. Westminster still distorts the figures, exaggerates the risks and relies on a compliant media to sow doubt amongst the electorate. But the facts are clear. Scotland is not the burden it has been made out to be. It is a nation rich in resources, talent and potential, shackled by a union that exploits its wealth while denying its people the fruits of their labour. Scotland's democratic will has been ignored repeatedly, with initiatives like the Deposit Return Scheme and drug consumption rooms vetoed, stifling progress on environmental and public health issues. Brexit, imposed despite of Scotland's overwhelming Remain vote, has devastated key industries such as fishing and agriculture. Westminster continues to siphon off North Sea oil revenues, underinvest in Scottish infrastructure and impose unfair grid charges on renewable energy producers, all while profiting from Scotland's energy exports. Social policies like welfare cuts, reduced winter fuel payments and the removal of TV licences have hit Scots disproportionately harder. At the same time, rigid immigration rules have exasperated labour shortages in key sectors. These policies, paired with a relentless media manipulation, perpetuate the myth of Scotland's dependency. The last decade has proven one thing: the Union serves Westminster interests and not Scotland's. The question is no longer whether Scotland can afford to be independent. The question is how much longer can Scotland afford to remain in this union? How much longer can we allow Westminster to squander our wealth, suppress our potential, and distort our reality? Independence is not merely a political choice, it's an economic necessity, a moral imperative, and a declaration that Scotland will no longer be complicit in its own exploitation. The time for half measures and excuses is over. It's time for Scotland to reclaim what is rightfully ours and build a future where our wealth serves our people and not Westminster's failures. Tomorrow night we will be live at 11 o'clock on YouTube and TikTok to discuss the themes of this week, do a little excerpt for each one of the videos, and we will discuss what the comments are saying, and we'll probably have some interesting unionist comments as well. I look forward to that. And as always, there's a blog attached to this video that you can get at saorsascot.com/blog. Until tomorrow night, you have a great day.
I can't get no sleep.